William Henry, and this is Dreamland. I read a lot of history books, but it's not very often I get to talk with a man for the history books, a man whose ideas have spawned an intellectual and indeed a spiritual revolution for millions of readers. My guest today is Zecharia Sitchin, author of 10 books, including his latest Earth Chronicles Expeditions. His life work has been revealing the secrets of the Anunnaki, those from heaven to earth came, and documenting the cosmology of a 12th planet in our solar system. Zecharia, welcome to Dreamland.
Hello. Good evening.
Very pleased to have you here, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, William.
And you're in New York City today.
I assume people would be able to pick up the interview at any time of day or night.
Yes, Zecharia, they'll be able to download this interview for a long time to come and enjoy it at their leisure.
So that's why I said good morning, good evening.
That's great. Thank you. One of the best things about your new book, and by the way, I absolutely loved it, and one of the best things that I found is that it enabled me to connect emotionally with your work, and I was very pleased that you took that approach. You provide behind-the-scenes scoops, the ups and downs along the way on your discoveries, and it seemed like as I'm reading it that you're always encountering a museum curator or an official who attempts to stonewall your investigation. And one of the things that is apparent is that you simply don't give up. Can you talk just for a moment about what drives you, Zecharia? What has taken you on this incredible journey that you've initiated over 30 years ago?
Well, I suppose it is really an unexpected question, but I suppose that what explains my tenacity, if that's the right word, that I just don't give up, and especially when I come across something that somebody doesn't want to show or to display or to reveal in a museum or somewhere else where ancient data is available. And that is that I'm trying to get to the truth, to find out for myself, and then through my writings to convey to my readers what really happened in history, in ancient times, and in prehistory. How did it all begin? How did we, mankind, humans, come about? And this is so because as I was continuing to write, and you mentioned that this is my 10th book now, I became more and more convinced. I realized, and then I became convinced, that we have to know the past, because the past is the future. When somebody wants to know what is going to happen in the near future, in the coming years, whether it is due to religious beliefs in a second coming or messianic beliefs in a Messiah coming in other times, in a New Jerusalem, etc. When you talk about that, you're really talking about the past repeating itself, the past revealing the future. And therefore, I was so tenacious and really, as the new book I think shows, went to great to great personal lengths in time, in expense, sometimes in getting myself into dangerous situations, but I persisted in finding out the evidence from the past.
Yeah, and it comes through so well. As I say, you don't mean to flatter you here, but you're practically like a superhero in so many instances, because so many people would have turned back. And so, once again, just want to congratulate you on your tenacity. In the book, you chronicle your expeditions in search of the secrets of Mari, of Mount Sinai, Atlantis in Mexico, the ancient tunnels of Jerusalem. But by far, to me, the most provocative and perhaps the most, let's say, newsworthy of your investigations is into the colossal stone blocks beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Why do you suppose those blocks were of the size, or what required them to be of that size?
Well, I have a suggestion. I have a possible answer, and what I really say is that the Temple Mount, that great platform, artificial platform, where the Temple of Solomon and subsequent temples stood, is really a reduced, in a reduced size, a duplication of the much more colossal structures at Baalbek in Lebanon, where the stone blocks used at that particular western wall, as in Jerusalem, weigh about 1,100 tons, and in Jerusalem the same trilliton is made up of stones that weigh 600, 700, maybe, half size of what it is in Baalbek. And that is my only solution to the puzzle, and that is that while the platform in Baalbek that goes back to days before the flood, before the deluge, served, as it is stated clearly in the Epic of Gilgamesh, as a landing place for whatever air or space vehicles the Anunnaki used, that the one in Jerusalem served as mission control center from which the spacecraft that landed in the Sinai Peninsula and for which the two great pyramids of Giza were built, that was the purpose of the platform in Jerusalem. So all of these sites, Baalbek in Lebanon, Jerusalem, the spaceport in the Sinai that was destroyed with nuclear weapons about 4,000 years ago, and the two pyramids, great pyramids of Giza, all were components of the post-flood, post-diluvial space facilities of the Anunnakis. I have made that suggestion, and I have no other reasonable or plausible explanation than this one.
And it seems that you can't pick up a magazine, tune on the television today without hearing about all of the turmoil in the Middle East and what's happening in Iraq. And it just seems to me that ultimately the only way that any of this makes any sense at all is with understanding of your books. Would you care to comment on this in terms of the relation of your to what's happening in that part of the world today?
I must tell you that just as we speak about, I think 3 or 4 days at the most ago, there was this terrorist suicide bombing at the Hilton Hotel at a place on the Gulf of Eilat called Taba. And in my chapter dealing with the Sinai Peninsula, I describe my stay at that very hotel and the crossing of the border that is just a few yards from that hotel, and my failed or disrupted attempt, because I went there because it has a helicopter pad, and I was supposed to take a helicopter flight one more time, because I have those photos in the book that I have not shown for almost 30 years until this book. I was supposed to take a helicopter flight the next morning, and it was foiled by the arrival of the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Mr. Brown, for some conference that he called in a hurry. So you're asking me the question, and I am asking myself the question, what is going on? I mean, almost every place, like in Jerusalem or in Baalbek, which is one of the favorite training places of the Hezbollah terrorist group in Lebanon, wherever I go, it seems that current events are trying to either catch up with me or overwhelm what I'm writing. Is there a reason for all that, Bill? Let the readers decide.
Right. Did you have any intuition personally that Iraq would become the hotbed it became, given the information that we know is underneath the ground yet in Iraq?
Well, as far as Iraq is concerned, the story of gods and men that started almost over 400,000 years ago, not 4,000, but 400,000 years ago. It all started there, and we are all familiar with the biblical prophecies, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, that, I'm Alpha and I'm Omega, I'm the first and I'm the last. What was the beginning will be the end. So I'm sitting and watching.
Yeah, and much has changed in the world, of course, since 1976 when you first published The 12th Planet. We now have cell phones, nanotechnology, mastery of the genetic code. That had to be something that just caught you by, if not surprised, by great intrigue. We have string theory, wormhole theory, but still your ideas only seem to gain more resonance. And
right.
Do you feel this way too, and can you explain that?
Well, maybe the explanation is, as I stated earlier in our talk, and that is that I'm dealing with the truth. I'm dealing with what really happened on Earth, and that hasn't changed whether technology has advanced, because we are still only catching up. One of the books that is devoted almost entirely to comparing the ancient data to modern scientific discoveries, titled Genesis Revisited, has a subtitle, Is Modern Science Only Catching Up with Ancient Knowledge? So we are just catching up, but we are still just catching up with what was known so much earlier in antiquity. And you mentioned this first book of mine, titled The 12th Planet. I can tell you that it is still outselling all my other books. In the American paperback edition, it is now in its 37th printing. The publisher tells me that this is the only book that they ever published that after 27 years is still in print and still selling tens of thousands of copies a year. All in all, it sold well over 1 million copies. And as the book gets translated, now as we move further out in Korean and in Chinese, etc., and the publishers ask me, is there anything you want to change? And I say absolutely nothing. Any edition, any translation, William, of the book of today is exactly the same as the first one published in 1976. There is absolutely nothing to change.
Yeah, and that's what makes your work so remarkable. It's kind of funny. People used to ask, well, which of Zechariah's 9 books and now 10 should I read? And I would always say, well, read all of them once or read The 12th Planet 9 times. Well, because that's the book that really drives the whole investigation. But now, coming back here to the Earth Chronicles expeditions, what can you tell us now about proof that if someone is new to this, and some of the listeners of Dreamland will be new, what proof would you bring forward right off the bat that you would suggest would be incontrovertible? Proof of the Anunnaki's existence and of their being on Earth.
You mean one single item?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I used to answer when interviews, even on radio and certainly on television, were held face to face. and somebody would ask me the question, what proof is there? What can you show us that would prove or act as proof, something physical that the Anunnaki have ever really been here? And I said, you are looking at it. We Homo sapiens would not have been here yet. Maybe eventually, yes, through evolution alone, because all the writings, and I stress it, even the Old Testament, the book of Genesis, do not negate evolution. Indeed, the first chapter of Genesis is evolution in a nutshell. So we would not have been yet here unless somebody more advanced, genetically, scientifically, etc., came here and using genetic engineering, which is described in the greatest detail in one areas, Bill, in which the ancient texts in detail, not in a generality, get confirmed and corroborated, is genetics. So unless somebody would have come and done that, jumped the gun on evolution, we wouldn't be here. But then, of course, if you ask, or if the question is in behalf of somebody who would ask for physical evidence, there are those immense stone structures at Baalbek. There is the relatively immense structures in Jerusalem. And it is interesting that all the megalithic structures, and some of them are, of course, in South America, compared to which such a stone circle as Stonehenge is just, child's play, that all of them are made of stone. And again, I find explanation in that fact to biblical statements, and I find in biblical statements explanation of these factual, physical pieces of evidence, and that is when Solomon was instructed to build the temple in Jerusalem, a very clear-cut instruction was not to use metal tools in its construction. So that is why all the structures left behind by the Anunnaki, those literally meaning those who from heaven to earth came, are made of stone and not of metal. So you have those structures, you have the physical evidence like us, you have the explanation for the beginning of domestication, the beginning of agriculture. That is why it ended up with 10 books and not just with the one basic book, the 12th planet. That's why I needed a book about the Americas and a book about the scientific aspects and about the space travel and about those few humans who were unable to go in space in antiquity, and not just to the moon in our recent time. So there is all this accumulation of evidence, which is a complete body of evidence that leads to one inescapable conclusion, and that is that we are not alone in our own solar system.
Right, and one of the things I've always wanted to ask you, Enki, you write about Enki as a genetic engineer of the Anunnaki pantheon, and
yes.
Enki would be the one primarily, along with Ninharzag, primarily responsible for effectively the design of the human body. Right. Have you looked for a signature by this artist? Because Enki would be, in my opinion, somewhat of an artist. Like when a computer engineer designs a computer chip, you'll find a signature, or a painter will often sign a painting.
Yes.
What would you suggest, or have you looked for a signature of Enki in our DNA?
Definitely. I show it in my books because Enki among his epithets, he was also known as air, whose home is water, and which has various implications explained in the book, the Lost Book of Enki. And he had the epithet name Nudimud, which means he who fashions or creates things, etc. But in Egypt, he was known as Ptah, which means the same thing, the fashioner, the developer, and his symbol, the hieroglyphic symbol for him, his name written in the Egyptian script was the double helix DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And on vases discovered in the ruins of Sumerian cities, at least one, which I show in my books, dedicated to him and to his son who helped him in the process of the genetic engineering, is that of the entwined serpents, which to this day is the symbol of medicine and healing. That was if you want, and it is a very good choice of words on your part, Bill. Never occurred to me to use it that way, and that was his signature. Mm-hmm. He said, want to know who I am? Here it is. And he would draw an entwined serpent, which is the double helix DNA.
Mm-hmm. Do you watch movies and television? Sometimes. I went and I remember distinctly going and watching the movie Stargate a few years ago. And yes. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but I distinctly
I definitely saw it because it used some of my material.
It used all of your material. It's the 12th planet brought to life on the screen.
I don't want to say all of it. They had some of their own ideas there, and of course, how to put it on the screen is an art. But and all I can tell you that my lawyers were in touch with their lawyers.
Okay, yeah, I'm wondering because as a fan, as a reader, I looked at that. I said, well, I know exactly where these ideas came from, and I'm just wondering what your comments may be on some of the other movies like Contact and such, because I had an opportunity to talk with Richard Hoagland, and we discussed this notion that maybe Carl Sagan, who wrote Contact, was trying to refer us back to ancient Babylon by naming one of his characters S.R. Haddon, and as a tip-off, as a way to reference.
One day, not in this interview, I will say some things I have to say about my contact or crossing of the paths with the late Carl Sagan, but not today.
You sure you don't want to just give us a little hint about what you might be?
Well, no.
Give us a little scoop here. No, that's great, because the reason I'm asking this, Zecharia, is because you just literally, it doesn't seem, as I said a moment ago, you can't watch a movie, you can't watch a TV series like Stargate SG-1 or Stargate Atlantis without seeing an homage or a tip-off to your books. And I'm just wondering, did you ever anticipate them having such a profound impact on so many millions of people when you're writing the books?
No, not honestly, no. As you for one certainly would know, because you heard me lecture and give seminars, not just read my books, but
right.
That my own involvement in this whole subject began as a result of my asking when I was just a schoolboy, 9 or 10 years old, studying the Bible, very fortunately, in its Hebrew, the Old Testament, in its original Hebrew language. And we reached chapter 6 of Genesis about what was going on just before the deluge, the great flood. And we read that the teacher explained that those were the days when there were giants upon the earth. And I raised my hand and said, but excuse me, my teacher, why do you say giants when the word in Hebrew, Nephilim, comes from the root verb nafol, which means to come down, to descend, to fall down, that thing of from up coming down, and in context coming down from heaven to earth. And I expected to be complimented for my linguistic acumen, and instead I was very harshly reprimanded for questioning the Bible, which I was not. And I was very hurt by this reprimand, and this became an obsession with me. Who were the Nephilim that the Bible mentions? And the same verses in chapter 6 of Genesis refer to them as the sons of the gods, sons plural, gods plural, who mated with the daughters of men and had children by them. So what's all this business of sons of gods in a Bible devoted totally to monotheism? So, but my research, the first book, was the result of a persistent and obsession, desire to find out who were the Nephilim. Then I discovered that they were called in Sumerian Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came, and all the rest of the stories that are in my 10 books to date. And so it started as a search for my own sake, which at some point I felt that I have so many insights into what the Bible says. I have so many understandings of what the Sumerian texts say. Indeed, when the first book was published, and it was almost wholly devoted to the Sumerians and their texts and what the texts mean and who the Anunnaki were, etc., the customary reference to those ancient writings were Babylonian. In ancient Babylon this and in ancient Babylon that, and the Babylonians appeared on the scene 2,000 years after the Sumerians. So, in a way, when you now come across references to Sumerians, this or their laws or their customs or what they wrote, I think I am entitled to some of the credit. So, no, that was a sharing of my discoveries with others. Never did I expect people to come to me or to write to me that my books changed their life and now they understand what they never understood before, and they too had doubts when they studied something in Sunday school, etc. So this is an unexpected result.
Right. One of the stories that you talk about, one of your expeditions you talk about in the Earth Chronicles expeditions, concerns the statue of Mary or Mari. Could you please talk about that for a moment?
Mari, not Mary.
Syria.
Mari. Yeah, Mari. Yeah, Mari. Well, now after the artificial boundary making that, among other things, created Iraq. Iraq is an artificial country. There was ancient Mesopotamia that encompassed mostly just the southern part of Iraq. The north was first Babylon and then Assyria and then the Hittites and so on. So now Mari happens now to be on this side, on the western side of the Euphrates River, which at that point forms the boundary between Syria and Iraq. But it was the 10th capital of ancient Sumer. The capital kept moving from one Sumerian city to another. And the archaeologists, in that case a French team, discovered there in the ruins, vast ruins, by the way. One thing that kept amazing me, William, is as I went myself, or then in this Earth Chronicles with small groups of fans to visit those sites when nobody else really goes, is the immense size of those ancient places. You know, you just stand on the mound and as far as the eye can see is this ancient place. I mean, these are not, tiny hamlets or villages. These are cities, really cities. And anyway, they found in the ruins a statue, life-size statue of a female, obviously a goddess because of her headdress, which had a pair of horns. And then they discovered her image in marvelous wall paintings, murals, in beautiful colors. I reproduce many of them in this new book in black and white, but for the first time, if we can mention, for the first time, this particular book, the Earth Chronicles Expeditions, includes 64 color plates, color photographs. So she turns out to have been the one known in antiquity as Ishtar. Her Sumerian name was Inanna, the beloved of Anu, and she was quite a lady in all realms, in fighting, in lovemaking, in her ambitions to have her own domains, and so on. This is a most interesting story, and one could write not one book, but books just about her.
Yeah, extraordinary. And by the way, on those color photographs, I remember the first time I picked up the Earth Chronicles expeditions, and you look in the center, and there's these amazing pictures. If anybody just wants an introduction to your work, that's a phenomenal place to start right there. And I want to talk about the Sinai photographs in a moment, but getting back to Mari just for a quick moment, were you aware that, for example, MIT is now in the process of developing a new nanotechnology super soldier suit for the U.S. military that is in many ways, shape, and form similar to Mari's Pala garment, her miracle garment?
No, I'm not.
Because it seems that they are drawing inspiration, and I'm just wondering if the folks at MIT are reading the 12th Planet when they're developing some of these new technologies for the U.S. military, because they're creating helmets, full body suit, garment type of things like Mari wore with these extraordinary capabilities. And I just wonder if this isn't, again, we're seeing some of the influence of Enki on the development of this new technology.
Could be. I was not aware of it.
Mm-hmm. And then one of the other pictures we have to talk about in one of your expeditions is that to the Sinai. Yes. When you came away with these amazing, amazing photographs of what appeared to be circular craft hovering above or actually landed upon Mount Sinai. Tell us about that.
Well, one really has to see the photographs. And as I state in the book, I took the original pictures in black and white with a simple camera in 1977, and when I chartered a small plane and flew a few places in the Sinai, but the focal point of my search at the time was the mount that I believe and am convinced was the real Mount Sinai of the Exodus and the Ten Commandments, etc. tale. And I was just taking pictures, seeing some interesting from the plane, some interesting feature here. This looked a little more white than usual or whatever. I was just taking pictures, and coming back home in New York, I had them developed and printed, and I could not believe, literally could not believe what some of those photographs were showing. And this was so incredible that I felt, and at that time I was writing my second book, The Stairway to Heaven, that does deal with the Sinai Peninsula, etc. That was one reason I took those flights, and then some flights before that, and went by car. You asked me about the tenacity. Okay, that was one aspect of them. But the photos were so incredible of a certain object and some other features like openings and like openings in a row and
the cave
was a round opening, all kinds of features.
Right.
One has to see the photographs to know what we are talking about, and they were so incredible that I felt that I cannot, in good conscience, show them or release them without going myself again to the place, and in this time not flying over the mount, but landing on it, landing with a helicopter and touching, if possible, those objects, and then looking in, and if it's a cave-like thing, etc. So that's why I went once again, and I tried for a third time, and I have some additional, more up-to-date color photographs. And as I mentioned, the final attempt took place when I was at the Hilton in Taba, and it was frustrated. So I decided after 27 years to show the photographs, and it's up to you and other readers to make up your mind. Is it for real or not?
Right. One of the big questions that's on a lot of people's minds these days is what is going to happen in 2012? And I know you touched on this in the Lost Realms, but do you see any connection between the Anunnaki and 2012?
Well, I'm going to write by it in book 11.
Oh, fantastic!
So I'll give you the answer in our next interview.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's good to hear so we've got a new book in the works. Will that be out this year, next year?
Not this year, but next year.
Not this year. Okay.
Well, and this year is almost over.
Mm-hmm. And just another subject that comes up a lot, and I know listeners are interested in it. I'm somewhat interested in it, and this is why I have to ask you about it. There's a lot of people that believe that the Enki faction of the Anunnaki are hybrid human reptilians, that they look human but they can shapeshift. Have you ever come across anything in the Sumerian text or have any data to offer that supports contention such as that?
Well, okay. It is my firm policy not to comment about the writings of others.
Right. I don't want you to do that. I'm just wondering if they show up in the Sumerian text.
Not because I may agree with them or disagree with them, but because I feel that each one is entitled to his opinion, to his view of the evidence, etc. So God bless all the others. But there was one instance, don't ask me for the names, where I felt very strongly meeting with that author, who, by the way, asked for the meeting and told me what he intends to write in his book on this subject of reptilians. And I told him, don't. It is just, it isn't so, okay? Just,
okay.
It isn't so.
That's
totally baseless.
Okay. But in your investigations into the Anunnaki, did you ever uncover any data that referenced other races besides the Anunnaki, or are the Anunnaki in competition with any other races for Earth?
Well, the Anunnaki were they came from their planet on which they evolved, on which they had various, if you want, nations, on which they had wars, in which nuclear weapons were used, and that's why their planet got into trouble.
Right.
And we don't have a color photographs of the Anunnaki. So, and I'm sometimes asked to explain the various of men on Earth, why some are white and some are black and some are, yellow and so on. I don't have the explanation. There were definitely various groups. The Anunnaki is a very encompassing term. It means those who from heaven to earth came. Were they all alike? Probably not. So I'm using this, if you want, generic term to describe those who came from Nibiru to earth.
I understand.
Were they all uniform? Probably not.
Mm-hmm. I was in Arizona recently talking with some locals who claim to have seen Anunnaki graves, described as tall, some of them over 8-9 feet tall. And so I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on the possibility that the Anunnaki inhabited ancient America and that we might find Anunnaki graves.
Well, that they were... the word inhabitant implies certain things, length of stay, etc., etc.
Visitor.
So I don't want visitor. This is that they were here. Okay.
Okay.
Of course. I mean, if they were able to travel in space from their planet to our planet and orbited our planet, then it would be, unreasonable to say no. They only landed and only like to be in what is now the Middle East. They never set foot on another continent. That's obviously not a logical statement. And then the so-called gods of the Americas, be it South America or Mesoamerica, as I say in my book, The Lost Realms, were the one and the same, were just under different names. Quetzalcoatl of Mexico was the same Thoth of Egypt, who was the same Ningishzida of the Sumerians. So now, would we find tombs or graves? If somebody can show me and convince me, I have an open mind.
Okay, great. And what you were saying just a moment ago about the transmission or transgression, the shift from Ningishzida to Thoth to Quetzalcoatl. In Earth Chronicles Expeditions, you note that Zeus emulated Enlil and that Poseidon emulated Ea or Enki. Do you see, how will the Anunnaki manifest themselves? Would you see a new turn of the cycle for them? Will we see new Anunnaki archetypes or new examples of the Anunnaki gods in mythology, and what should we look for?
Look for where? In text?
How will we?
Right.
How would we know? Like, for example, I what sparks this too is there's a computer game company called EA, and every time I see that, I think of EA or Enki, and I just wonder if the Anunnaki they've so permeated our consciousness that we're going to start seeing them reappear, so to speak, in technology and ideas and art. And I'm just wondering if you have any ideas of how
William,
they may...
I think you're talking to me about the book that you intend to write. Am I wrong?
No, I hadn't really thought about that. It's just a question that I look around, and because
this is the kind of questions that lead to books.
Right. I live here in Nashville, Tennessee, and we have a copy of the Parthenon from ancient Greece, and it never made a whole lot of sense to me until I realized from your works that when we're looking at...
Well, if you look at TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority project, then you should think of of the chapter in my latest book about how Joseph saved Egypt, because that's how he saved Egypt, with waterworks. So did this inspire the Tennessee Valley Project? Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? But we definitely see the Anunnaki again coming up over and over again in myths and symbols, and especially in the marketplace now. And I just think it's so incredible that the only way that this makes a whole lot of sense is by understanding your books. So that's one of the, probably something you didn't anticipate as an outgrowth of your work, but it certainly is helping tremendous numbers of people.
Well, between books, I write all kinds of shorter pieces and post them on my website, Sitchin.com. So
right, you must have 15 or so articles at Sitchin.com, right? And they're always appearing.
As they say, who counts?
Right. So it's certainly one of the most exciting times.
The latest one, by the way, is about the case of the French astronomer. I don't know if you saw it.
I did see that. Can you summarize it for us?
Pardon?
Yeah, I did see that. He's actually begun to validate what you're talking about, but unfortunately he didn't give you direct credit.
A leading journal in France called Science Vie, Science and Life, that carried a big story, but mostly based on an interview with an astronomer at France's leading observatory at the Côte d'Azur, and they discussed, the latest discoveries in the Kuiper belt and this planetoid called Sedna, and all kinds of updating. And he there went into a whole discourse about there being one more planet, which he predicted will be discovered, and described the planet and how it originated and how it happened to be a member of our solar system, and even offered the magazine which they published a sketch of the planet's orbit and where in that orbit it is probably now. And what he said is really a repetition of my understanding, starting in the first book, The 12th Planet, of the Sumerian cosmogony and the collision that led to the addition of this one more planet into our solar system, which they called Nibiru and was the planet of the Anunnaki. And based on further research and advances in my book Genesis Revisited, I gave the orbit of the planet and where it is probably now, and this astronomer in France offered the magazine as his sketch, my sketch, apart from following my thesis, etc. And when he was contacted about it, he played dumb and didn't answer. And when my French editors contacted the magazine, they said it's impossible. I mean, it's not possible that the French astronomer would pick up ideas or a sketch from somebody in the United States. They just are above that. So getting nowhere with the French themselves, I decided to put the story on my website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, glad you did. And that brings up another question. I've recently read about the activity, the endeavor by the scholars from the Pennsylvania Sumerian Dictionary Project, where they're assembling a massive Sumerian dictionary that'll be on the Internet. And they estimated that there are 25,000 tablets a year coming out of the ground in Iraq. What missing information, if any, would you be looking for in tablets such as that?
Well, we know because in those ancient lands, both temples and royal palaces had actual libraries, and they didn't keep books as we keep books. They kept clay tablets on which the text, the stories, the information was inscribed in a script we call cuneiform, made by the scribe with a wedge-like stylus. And those tablets were arranged on shelves the way we arrange our books in modern libraries, on shelves, wooden shelves, one tablet next to the other. And at the beginning of each shelf, there was a catalog tablet that the library authority from that ancient days would make a list of the titles of the tablets that are on that shelf. And thus we know, because, through wars and earthquakes and passage of time and whatnot, most of those places were damaged, buried under the sand, destroyed in fires, destroyed in wars, and whatnot. So what we know and the many texts that I mention in my books are really the result of discoveries and many times of piecing together fragments and deciding that this fragment complements that fragment, etc. Some in more or less intact tablets were also found, but mostly it took years and years and years of putting the whole thing together. And we know that what we have put together, what we were able to decipher and to translate, to read and to translate, is just a fraction of the texts that are listed by those catalog tablets at the beginning of each shelf. From those alone, we know how much we are missing. And, I don't have it in front of me, but I could list you title after title after title of highly significant texts that we have not found yet.
Do you put any credence into the notion? I'm not asking you to comment really on a conspiracy theory, but let me ask it this way: how did you feel when you watched the destruction of the Iraqi National Museum at the beginning of the?
I felt badly, very badly.
Yeah. That's watching history unfold. You read about conquest that happened in the ancient world, but you haven't seen that in the modern world, at least that I can recall, of just a devastating loss such as that.
Fortunately, due to the fact that we have photography and we have other means of copying and recording of what was on exhibit and what is lost or disappeared. But, there's this famous case of the library in Alexandria,
right,
where they didn't make photocopies of anything, and a vast store of information has been lost. So,
do you put any credence into the idea?
It's heartbreaking. Yes. But at the same time, it makes it possible for a guy like me to piece the story together and tell it to others.
Have you ever encountered secret societies or governments that you're in competition with that are secretly pursuing the science and history of the Anunnaki?
No, I cannot complain of any secret whatever. No. I'm not party to any conspiracy theory.
Oh, I'm not suggesting you are. I'm just wondering if you've ever encountered that as one of the people that
I write in the latest book about instances where museums have objects that they don't display, or that they displayed and hurriedly took off, took out of the display case because
right, yeah, you told some great stories about
conflicts with established theories. But that yes, that I encountered plenty, and what I write about in this book, the Earth Chronicles Expeditions, is really I'm just writing about a few of the journeys and a few of the subjects. I probably could write another one or two or three books to really tell all that I have seen and encountered.
And I hope you do, Zecharia. It's been a very, very fast hour. I want to thank you deeply for taking the time to talk with us today. It's been absolutely wonderful talking with you.
Well, it's a pleasure being on your program, and say hello to Whitley and Anne.
Linda Moulton Howe, unique in this world, a science reporter who dares to approach our environment with an open mind. She's willing to look at the deepest of mysteries, and her website, earthfiles.com, is the very finest website of its kind in the world. Do not let your day pass without going to earthfiles.com. Linda Moulton Howe, the best there is. One reporter who loves mysteries is radio's leading science journalist, Linda Moulton Howe. She's an Emmy Award-winning TV producer, documentary and film writer, and the reporter and editor for earthfiles.com, the Internet's most respected edge science website. Today she's got a report for us updating the Shag Harbor UFO incident from Canada, one of the strangest and best documented UFO incidents in history. Here she is from Philadelphia, Linda Moulton Howe.
Thanks, Whitley. One of the most interesting conferences about the UFO phenomena that I've ever attended and spoken before was the 2003 Crash Retrieval Conference in Las Vegas, organized by MJ-12 document investigators Bob and Ryan Wood, and they're doing it again this year. The second annual UFO Crash Retrieval Conference will be November 12th to the 14th at the Sunset Station Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada. The speaker lineup features Canadian researchers Grant Cameron and Don Ledger, British researcher Nick Redfern, and American investigators including myself, Jim Mars, Peter Robbins, Dr. David Pace, Stephen Bassett, Dr. Robert Wood, and his son Ryan Wood. The subject matter is hard evidence in documents and eyewitnesses about government knowledge and cover-up of crashes and government retrievals of non-human craft, technologies, and entities. For ticket information, go to www.ufoconference.com. I would love to meet our Dreamland and Earth Files audiences, so hope a lot of you will attend and come and say hello. I really, really encourage you because this was a great conference last year, and I think it will be even greater this year. One of the speakers, Canadian Don Ledger, has investigated the extraordinary UFO case that provoked Canadian and American military investigations for 7 days in the region of Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia, Canada, from October 4th, 1967 to about October 11th. This is from Nova Scotia and Shag Harbor up the coast. Don Ledger has written a detailed book about this entitled Dark Object. That was the phrase actually used in government documents about whatever was in that water. And that book is available at Amazon.com. From our long interview about the 7 days of Canadian and American civilian and military investigations in Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia, and up the coast, I want to share with our Dreamland audience some of the startling events that occurred after many people reported what they thought was one or more airplanes that had fallen into Shag Harbor, creating a strange yellow light in the water. Don Ledger begins when 2 Coast Guard cutters late on the night of October 4th, 1967, take off to look for human bodies dead or alive, from what they supposed crashed in that water. And what they found was very strange.
But the first two boats went out across the sound and encountered the first of the anomalies, which was this thick, cream, yellow, glittery foam, as the fishermen described it, the ones that we've interviewed, that was really thick on the water, about 3 or 4 inches thick. It was about 80 feet wide and about a half a mile long.
Wow.
They weren't fussy about sailing through the stuff with their fishing boats, and the fishing boats are about 45 feet long by about 14, 16 feet wide. They're motorized, were in those days, and there was some roiling in the water, bubbling, and so on. There was maybe the smell of sort of a sulfurous smell too in the water. Now they were thinking this might have had something to do with the interaction of jet fuel or some kind of aviation fuel with seawater. They didn't know. They were all kind of nervous, thinking they were going to find bodies, but they never found anything other than this foam.
And was it glowing?
It sort of glittered, like it said. One of the fishermen said, like as if you'd taken sort of shaving cream. It didn't look like sea foam. You know, they all knew what sea foam was. It wasn't anything like it. If you took sort of a shaving cream and sprinkled yellow speckle or gold speckle on it, it had that kind of a shimmer to it. And there was, later on in one of the documents that said military documents that it's a shame so nobody thought to take a sample, but nobody was thinking that they were looking for anything unusual other than bodies and so on. They heard the boat starting up. I remember Ron O'Brien telling me one time, he says it was so clear that night and quiet out there on the water, he was out on one of the boats, that they could hear the twin diesel starting up in the Coast Guard cutter over on Clark's Harbor in Cape Sable Island. It was a twin diesel thing. Still, it was 13 miles away and at its speed. It took them almost an hour to get there. But they showed up, gave a message to Ron O'Brien, who was out on the water, saying that the Rescue Coordination Center had done a search looking for any missing vessels, any missing aircraft, private aircraft, and so on. And they didn't just stop in the Nova Scotia area. Of course, they did a full military search, and they checked down in the eastern U.S. and so on, looking for commercial flights and military flights as well. And nothing was missing. So at this point, everybody's wondering, well, what the heck were we looking for? What was this when into the water? And of course, it's the rest of the story comes after that. The ensuing search, the Navy sent down divers. They were looking for something that might have been on the bottom, and they arrived finally on Friday. Now, don't forget, this incident actually began, if you want to call that the main part of the incident, or at least the Shag Harbor sighting, began around 20 to 25 after 11 on the evening of October the 4th. So we're quickly into October the 5th. Mm-hmm. And by October the 6th, the newspaper in Halifax was taking this pretty seriously. Particularly the Halifax Chronicle Herald, which has been around for like 200 years in one form or another, and is one of the most widely read newspapers in Eastern Canada. It's pretty prestigious newspaper as well. They posted a headline, a double red headline on the top of their newspaper on the following Saturday, saying, maybe something concrete, the UFO crash in Shag Harbor, RCAF, Royal Canadian Air Force, RCAF, which was kind of quite a thing, for this paper to put something like that on their banner, 2-inch high headlines, at the top of the newspaper, because it's a pretty conservative rag, and it still is today. But anyway, the divers were down by Friday afternoon, starting to do a look. They wanted to knock off around 6 that evening, saying that they hadn't found anything on the bottom, but the word came back from RCC in Halifax to stay at it until they were told to stop, which was kind of unusual. We thought, we didn't know this, earlier on. It started to make more sense as we got further into this case. But anyway, they kept at it until Sunday night, till around 8 o'clock, and then they finally were told that they could, discontinue the search and go back to Halifax. Now, apparently they did pick some stuff up off the bottom. Now, whether they did that because they didn't know for sure what they were looking for and there was some debris on the bottom, I would be surprised if there wasn't a lot of debris on the bottom around a busy fishing port. There's always like old anchors and, things they use for buoys and so on and so forth, like car axles or engine blocks or anything like that on the bottom. But it was surprisingly clean there. And there's a portion of the story that I've been investigating off and on myself for the last couple of years, which has a connection to, believe it or not, the Yukon here, where a couple of women live up there now, a couple of sisters, twin sisters, who claim that their father was involved in this thing, and he was a captain in the RCAF at Greenwood Air Force Base, and was told to go into Halifax and pick up material that had been taken from Shag Harbor to Halifax, the naval armament depot there, and then it was taken down in the United States. This is a lot. Some of it's anecdotal. Some of it, there is some record of it, but it's difficult to prove anything, of course. But we do know that there was a fellow by the name of Maurice Coffey, his name was, who was a psychologist working for the Defense Research Board here in Canada. He was assigned somehow to the case. He was the receiver of goods from Shag Harbor and took them and had investigated them at the Naval Armament Depot. Now, we don't know for sure whether this particular, this stuff that was brought off the bottom was anomalous or not. But it seems strange to me that if it was anything other than anomalous, that they would put it on a flatbed truck and take it down to the United States, if we can put any stock in that into that story. Again, anecdotal.
How did Maurice Coffey spell his name?
His name is referred to as Mace, M-A-C-E, C-O-F-E-E.
And what was his title?
Well, he was a scientist working for the Defense Research Board, apparently in the field of psychology.
And did you ever get any details about whether his work in psychology had to do with counterintelligence or something like that?
Well, I would imagine he probably had something to do with counterintelligence in some manner or degree. We had touched base eventually with his daughter. He's since passed away, and who told us that her early life had memories of a lot of people in and out of their lives who were involved with the military and so on and so forth, and that there was always some sort of, seemed to be like, some secret thing going on. She'd asked him about UFOs on different occasions, and he wouldn't talk about it. And but of course, the fact that he wouldn't talk about it doesn't make it a fact that there was something there. But our subsequent attempts to contact people who he worked with back in those days have been fruitless. They won't talk to us.
Have you asked point blank, do you know anything about the foam or the yellow light in Shag Harbor on October 4th through the 5th and 6th of 67?
No. There was nobody to talk to. I mean, nobody talked to us in that regard.
What is the strongest evidence, either in terms of eyewitness testimony or documents or physical evidence, that you've come across in your investigation that would link the Shag Harbor incident in 1967 to something in the so-called extraterrestrial realm?
Well, remember I mentioned that the people involved originally in this, the original witnesses and so on, thought it was an airplane, but it was the military that tagged it as a UFO on the documents. There's quite a document trail here, starting with the air desk in Ottawa. This is the one that used to handle UFO reports. Squadron leader Dane, who was in charge that particular night, he's the one that actually made the margin notes on the document stating UFO, and he underlined it 3 times. He was the one that got the search initiated through Rescue Coordination Center in Halifax to go look on the bottom. The paper trail after that, there's a Colonel Turner involved, without me getting all my notes out here and everything. There's a Colonel Turner who was the overall coordinator, it seems, of the search, who said, made no bones about the fact that this couldn't be explained away by any space junk, it couldn't be explained away by flares, it couldn't be explained away by aircraft, and so on and so forth. We have documents, different documents denoting different particular occurrences after the fact For instance, there was a flight of B-52 bombers went over within probably 20 to 25 minutes after this, heading north. Now, these would have come out of probably Loring Air Force Base in Maine. One wonders why.
These events continued to occur past midnight until October 5th for how long?
Yeah, basically for about 7 days.
7 days?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the whole event takes place over a period of 7 days.
Okay, explain that.
Well, to shorten it up a bit for you, the smart money is on two objects going into the water, and they're making their way out of the sound next to the harbor into the rip, and then traveling northeast up the coast and settling on the bottom off of the mouth of Shelburne Harbor.
But the idea when you say that these were objects that were intelligently controlled and for whatever reason did not want to be obvious and were using the weather side.
Yes. But what apparently happened is these two objects came up, settled on the bottom in about 80 feet of water on the magnetic anomaly detection grid off of Government Point. Government Point, which was thought to be, as I mentioned, some kind of a really mundane government oceanographical study installation, which turns out to be a Sousa's base for the United States Navy, which was the underwater listening microphone set up they had in the North Atlantic. It was top secret for years and years and years, and it didn't really become public knowledge in Nova Scotia until about 1988. So 1967 was a real. It was only in 1967 that even any military, Canadian military, were even involved in the work at the base. For the most part, we were just ancillary, guarding, doing the cleanups and cooking the food and so on. But eventually became ended up sharing the operation of the base up until around 1994 when they closed it out.
Okay, but what you mean is that the Americans were dominating Government Point in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, they were. They owned it at that point. They started it. They bought and got rights to use it up front, starting back around 1949.
And does anybody know why the American government bought Government Point?
Well, they brought the cables in from the North Atlantic. They had microphones salted all the way over from the Sea of Murmansk, over and towards Russia and around Greenland, back down around Labrador, right down around the coast, right into Halifax, right into Government Point location there, and then down as far as the New England area where there's another base down there. These were called Sousa's, and you'll have to excuse me right now that acronym, the meaning of the acronym escapes me. I can't remember. Sub-undersea sonar microphone operation of some description, but they could pick up the propeller noises and hull noises of ships passing through the water, and they could triangulate by using the microphones.
So our American government's installation, the Sousa installation at Government Point in Nova Scotia, since the end of the 1940s meant that the American government was very well aware of any sound, any vibration that was occurring underneath the water.
Oh, for sure.
What did people say that they knew was occurring off of Government Point?
To narrow it right down, or again paraphrase it, that there was two objects on the bottom in 80 feet of water. There were 7 vessels, at least 7, parked over this thing for about 7 days, 6.5 days to 7 days, when they could get the assets into the area, and they observed the object using divers. Again, I mentioned 80 feet of water. That's not very deep, not for diving. And pictures were taken, and observations were made. At one point, whether suspiciously or not, maybe it was just one of the usual occurrences, there was apparently a Soviet sub was testing the 12-mile limit again and made a run at the coast. And several of the vessels departed to give chase or to give defense. These things then started to move. They moved back down again to the Shag Harbor area. And then
these two unidentifieds under the water moved from off of Government Point back to Shag Harbor.
Yeah.
And could people see lights moving under the water.
Nobody mentioned anything about moving lights under the water, no.
Only through magnetic anomalies did they know that these things were moving?
I'm assuming that they knew that portion of it, but I don't know for sure, Linda, because, there's no documentation on it. This whole thing is what we call the story. We cannot nail it down definitely, but the people who were involved, and we have no reason to disbelieve them, say that this thing happened. As a matter of fact, they gave us some of the details we didn't know before about the object, original object anyway, coming in from over Siberia into North American airspace and scaring the hell out of everybody.
So that these originated from Siberia before they came down in Shag Harbor and then went up the coast into Government Point?
Two of the military personnel that told us about this said the objects made a half orbit and came in over Siberia.
And that is one of the startling pieces that Don Ledger has been able to add to this, is that the more they were able to find people who could give them at least some insight about what happened in '67, that this was being tracked from Siberia, whatever these objects were, all the way into and down into the water of the Nova Scotia Shag Harbor. And another thing, Whitley, that I learned from Don, he said that one of the divers who was out there over that long period of time when the objects had moved up off of Government Point, that they talked about watching things moving around down the 80 feet below the two objects. And he said the only implication that was ever stated was that it appeared that one of the objects seemed to be doing something to help the other object 80 feet down at the bottom of the water. And I often wonder, Whitley, if all of the classified and hidden UFO and non-human related files were brought together in one place, would it fill Madison Square Garden?
Oh, I think it would at least fill Madison Square Garden. Linda, all I can tell you is this. Obviously, secrets are being kept. Obviously, someone is here and has been here for a long time. There had better be a darn good reason for this secrecy. If there isn't, boy, I think that heads should roll.
Well, and there is just so much more to this amazing Shag Harbor case, which Don Ledger is going to talk about in Las Vegas at that second annual UFO Crash Retrieval Conference. And I'd like for the Dreamland listeners to know that he has a great website about this. It's www.donledger.com. And one piece of this, taking off from what you've just said and what Don and I've talked about, I'm going to be presenting excerpts from classified U.S. government documents that have come to Bob and Ryan and me and to others, and building from them, piece by piece, what I think may be reasons why the Truman administration ordered a policy of denial about all ET matters in the interest of national security. And I think one of those subjects that is so sensitive that they have never wanted a link to be made in the public's and the media's mind is between the non-human presence in the global animal mutilation phenomenon that has been going on since, as far as I can tell, at least the early 1950s.
At least. And, the fact that phenomenon is so bizarre and disturbing could be part of the reason for the secrecy, because it could be that the President of the United States would have to go out on TV and say, well, ladies and gentlemen, there's some very strange beings here. They're highly intelligent. They're far more powerful than we are. We can do nothing whatsoever about them. And not only do they mutilate cattle, they're liable to show up in your bedroom. Thank you very much. And I don't somehow think that press conference is ever going to happen.
Yeah, and when you go back to Shag Harbor, and you realize that Canadian and American military forces were in there for an entire week, and that for somebody had information that they had monitoring from the surface of the water apparently, according to Dawn, they don't have any information that anybody tried to go down in the water to approach these craft that stayed down there, and that they had at least they had the impression that there was a problem and that one of these objects was trying to help the other object, and that these quote-unquote things, never been defined by the eyewitness, what were the things that seemed to relate to an effort to help. It suggests that somebody in the Canadian and American government knew that we could be there as humans monitoring on the surface without any concern of any harm. And these are some of the mixed signals in this phenomena that keeps me intrigued about different agendas, different types, and possibly different futures, depending upon what is announced publicly first.
Well, Linda, thank you for a fabulous report, and you know, this is the best. It's the most well documented case of I think UFO case there is. I don't think there is a better documented one, and it was beautifully done. Remember the conference that's coming up, and why don't you repeat their website again?
Yes,
pick up a magazine, tune on the television today without hearing about all of the turmoil in the Middle East and what's happening in Iraq. And it just seems to me that ultimately the only way that any of this makes any sense at all is with understanding of your books. Would you care to comment on this in terms of the relation of your to what's happening in that part of the world today?
I must tell you that as we speak about, I think 3 or 4 days at the most ago, there was this terrorist suicide bombing at the Hilton Hotel at a place on the Gulf of Eilat called Taba. And in my chapter dealing with the Sinai Peninsula, I describe my stay at that very hotel and the crossing of the border that is just a few yards from that hotel, and my failed or disrupted attempt because I went there because it has a helicopter pad, and I was supposed to take a helicopter flight one more time because I have those photos in the book that I have not shown for almost 30 years until this book. I was supposed to take a helicopter flight the next morning, and it was foiled by the arrival of the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Mr. Brown, for some conference that he called in a hurry. So you're asking me the question, and I am asking myself the question, what is going on? Weigh about 1,100 tons, and in Jerusalem, the same trilliton is made up of stones that weigh 600, 700, maybe, half size of what it is in Baalbek. And that is my only solution to the puzzle, and that is that while the platform in Baalbek that goes back to days before the flood, before the deluge, served, as it is stated clearly in the Epic of Gilgamesh, as a landing place for whatever air or space vehicles the Anunnaki used, that the one in Jerusalem served as mission control center from which the spacecraft that landed in the Sinai Peninsula and for which the 2 great pyramids of Giza were built, that was the purpose of the platform in Jerusalem. So all of these sites, Baalbek in Lebanon, Jerusalem, the spaceport in the Sinai that was destroyed with nuclear weapons about 4,000 years ago, and the 2 pyramids, great pyramids of Giza, all were components of the post-flood, post-diluvial space facilities of the Anunnakis. I have made that suggestion, and I have no other reasonable or plausible explanation than this one.
And it seems that you can't.
I just don't give up, and especially when I come across something that somebody doesn't want to show or to display or to reveal in a museum or somewhere else where ancient data is available. And that is that I'm trying to get to the truth, to find out for myself, and then through my writings to convey to my readers what really happened in history, in ancient times, and in prehistory. How did it all begin? How did we, mankind, humans, come about? And this is so because as I was continuing to write, and you mentioned that this is my 10th book now, I became more and more convinced. I realized, and then I became convinced, that we have to know the past, because the past is the future. When somebody wants to know what is going to happen in the near future, in the coming years, whether it is due to religious beliefs in a second coming or messianic beliefs in a Messiah coming in other times, in a New Jerusalem, etc. When you talk about that, you're really talking about the past repeating itself, the past revealing the future. And therefore, I was so tenacious and
William Henry, and this is Dreamland. I read a lot of history books, but it's not very often I get to talk with a man for the history books, a man whose ideas have spawned an intellectual and indeed a spiritual revolution for millions of readers. My guest today is Zecharia Sitchin, author of 10 books, including his latest Earth Chronicles Expeditions. His life work has been revealing the secrets of the Anunnaki, those from heaven to earth came, and documenting the cosmology of a 12th planet in our solar system. Zecharia, welcome to Dreamland.
Hello. Good evening.
Very pleased to have you here, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, William.
And you're in New York City today.
I assume people would be able to pick up the interview at any time of day or night.
Yes, Zecharia, they'll be able to download this interview for a long time to come and enjoy it at their leisure.
So that's why I said good morning, good evening.
That's great. Thank you. One of the best things about your new book, and by the way, I absolutely loved it, and one of the best things that I found is that it enabled me to connect emotionally with your work, and I was very pleased that you took that approach. You provide behind-the-scenes scoops, the ups and downs along the way on your discoveries, and it seemed like as I'm reading it that you're always encountering a museum curator or an official who attempts to stonewall your investigation. And one of the things that is apparent is that you simply don't give up. Can you talk just for a moment about what drives you, Zecharia? What has taken you on this incredible journey that you've initiated over 30 years ago?
Well, I suppose it is really an unexpected question, but I suppose that what explains my tenacity, if that's the right word, that really, as the new book I think shows, went to great to great personal lengths in time, in expense, sometimes in getting myself into dangerous situations, but I persisted in finding out the evidence from the past.
Yeah, and it comes through so well. As I say, you don't mean to flatter you here, but you're practically like a superhero in so many instances because so many people would have turned back. And so, once again, just want to congratulate you on your tenacity. In the book, you chronicle your expeditions in search of the secrets of Mari, of Mount Sinai, Atlantis in Mexico, the ancient tunnels of Jerusalem. But by far, to me, the most provocative and perhaps the most, let's say, newsworthy of your investigations is into the colossal stone blocks beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Why do you suppose those blocks were of the size, or what required them to be of that size?
Well, I have a suggestion. I have a possible answer, and what I really say is that the Temple Mount, that great platform, artificial platform, where the Temple of Solomon and subsequent temples stood, is really a reduced, in a reduced size, a duplication of the much more colossal structures at Baalbek in Lebanon, where the stone blocks used at that particular western wall, as in Jerusalem,